Hi, everyone. We're going to start just in a little bit, just letting a few more folks trickle in. Hi, and welcome, everyone. We're going to start. Thanks so much for making the time to join us today for this information session. My name is Sharon, and I'm one of the partnerships managers at the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. We'd like to inform you that today's session will be recorded, and this is a session that will only be delivered in English. Tomorrow's session will be delivered in French, so you can register there if you're interested. And I'll now pass the time to my colleagues to introduce themselves. So Ibrahima, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone, my name is Ibrahim Gay and I'm one of the partnership managers, working closely with Sharon to deliver these funds. Welcome and enjoy. Pass it on to Abiola.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Abiola. I work with the CRF as part of the Grants and Community Investment team. I'm excited to have you all join us for this information session, and I know it'll be of great use to all of you interested in applying for the National Anti-Racism Fund. So welcome. I will now pass the time to my colleague Shannon, who is also the director of the program.
Hi folks, and nice to meet you all today. My name is Shannon Ryan, the very new Director of Community Investment here at the CRF. Really glad that you're all joining us today. We're very much looking forward to this session, and we hope you leave it with a better sense of, the inner workings of our NARF events and youth program. But before we jump in, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement, and I would really like to start by acknowledging that the land that I'm speaking to you from is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and that these lands are now home to, as we all know, many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. I also acknowledge that Toronto, where both I and the offices of the CRF are located, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and our lands that were in dispute for more than 200 years between the early 1800s and the early 2000s. Today, beyond Toronto, the lands that we share are home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people, and we acknowledge them as traditional caretakers of these lands and acknowledge the many distinct groups of First Nation people that live on these lands, each with their own language and customs and territories, from the Heshkwit on the west coast to the Beatuk on the east coast, the Hautla-Deche in the north, the Algonquin, the Anishinaabe, the Nishnawbe, the Potawatomi, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee, and all of their nations, and so many others that have called these lands home for tens of thousands of years. While we acknowledge the Indigenous caretakers of these lands, I think it's important that we also pause to acknowledge the Indigenous elders and leaders and knowledge carriers that CRF works with, and the ones that may be on this call today. We're grateful to be working with them, and we're grateful to be working with you, and we're grateful to be living and loving and playing and working on these lands that we live on. So with that, I'd like to call our meeting to order. And I would like to introduce our incredible Executive Director, Mohammed Hashim. And Mohammed, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Shannon, and for everybody for attending today. This is a really important meeting for us to be able to share the work that we're doing. Earlier this year, our board of directors created a new strategic plan. In the strat plan, it was really clear. Our board of directors instructed us as staff to work with different communities across this country to figure out ways to move the dial on public policy. We know very clearly from our position, there's only about 30 staff from across this country at the CRF, and so we can't be everywhere at all times. But we also know that the best solutions to dealing with systemic racism come when communities work directly with their institutions to find new ways to address issues that have been there for a long time and to create precedents. And that precedence then becomes policy, and that policy becomes repeatable, and that policy can become a bylaw or a law or whatever it might be. And then the rest of the country finds those things, including us, and then we start putting them in different places and suggesting those the replication of good public policy across this country. But it all starts with good ideas. And I cannot stress the value of how important it is to bring people together to formulate good ideas. And that's what essentially this funding is for. It's not a ton of money. It's a small grant of up to $10,000. However, what it does is that it's an entry point for people to come together and find ways to do things differently. There's a ton of grants within the government of Canada, and also more that will be coming from the CRF that are larger sums for more institutional work. But here, what we're looking to do is to spark relationships and ideas. We know events and youth programming bring people together, particularly at a time like we are today, when we've cultivated our online experiences to echo the same fears, aspirations, and hopes that we believe in, but also completely ignore the views of others. The lives that we live are cultivated, curated, and controlled and algorithmed by our likes, our shares, and our own experiences. So we've become, in many ways, living in silos. And part of why we want to have events that bring people together is to break those silos and to figure out ways where we can have not just places where we can come together to feel stronger amongst our people, but places where we can come together and have honest discussion about ways to improve society. And that's what our events and youth initiative grants really hope to achieve. And we're looking forward to working in partnership with you. Last year, I believe it was about 200 organizations that received this funding, and we're hoping to replicate a similar type number for this year or in and around there. But we look forward to working with you. And today's program put together by our incredible team of Shannon, Sharon, Ibrahima, Abiola, but also our programs department, Saveka for putting this webinar, and our communications department for putting this together, and the whole program. So I just want to give them thanks for the work that you've done. And then also, and then you're going to go over all the grant requirements and all the questions that will be coming forward. But before I leave, I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that our Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and People with Disabilities, Minister Kamal Khera, could not be here today, but sends her good wishes and wishes you all, an informative session and the desire for all of us to work together. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to Shannon.
Oh, thank you so much, Mohammed, for starting us off in such a great way and for grounding us in what we're here to accomplish and the value and purpose of NARF grants. We really appreciate your time today. So we have less than an hour together, so I think we'll jump right in if it's okay. Today, our session is really for prospective grantees, right? And we want to spend time with you to build on your knowledge and understanding of the requirements of the NARF events and youth funding, really ultimately to deepen your understanding of our funding requirements and ultimately to support the submission of strong applications that meet our funding criteria. Today, we'll be covering, as you can see in the agenda, the purpose of the National Anti-Racism Fund. We'll talk a little bit about our themes and objectives and expected results. We'll dive into eligibility and our application process, and we'll end with talking about how we support the submission of strong applications. Sharon and I, who you've met, will present for about 30 minutes. And then we'll go to your questions. Now, in terms of questions, we ask that you submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll be sorting through these questions throughout the session, and we'll address, I think, most of them in our last 30 minutes. You know, given that there are a couple of hundred of us on the call today, or on the webinar, I should say, we'll get to as many of the questions as we can. Some of them we'll actually answer live in the Q&A box, and others Sharon, Ibrahima, or I will speak to. Please note, we'll prioritize questions regarding the application process and grant criteria, etc. And the reality is we might not get to all questions today, given that we have a limited amount of time and a lot of people in the room. Now, if your questions aren't answered today, if your questions about NARP are not answered today, feel free to send us questions at the grants@CRF inbox, okay? I also note that the deck will be sent to you after this session and that we will be posting, as we've said in the chat, the recording of this session on our website at a date shortly. But also, like Mohammed, before we start, before we jump into business, I also want to really publicly acknowledge the excellent work of the NARF team and the incredible leadership of Sharon and Ibrahima and Abiola as they've designed this session, as they've designed the grants program, as they prepare for adjudicating many, many, many hundreds of applications over the next couple of months. I just need to stop and pause and recognize you all for your excellence and your commitment. And I think if we were in a room full of people together today, I would ask for folks to give you a round of applause, right? So I just want to share my appreciation and recognize your excellence and your commitment to this great work. So with that said, I'll get started as well. And just kind of moving on to this next slide and thinking about what we're trying to accomplish through NARF. And Mohammed's spoken to a little bit about this already, but we really are, as an organization, working to strengthen the social fabric of Canadian society by supporting and enabling, as you can see, and convening both community groups and organizations through our grants, through our services, through a really wide network of knowledgeable people, the public, researchers, and other community partners. As you might know, we're a Crown corporation committed to really supporting organizations like yours, community and grassroots organizations across country, whose mission is ultimately to root out racism and discrimination through outreach and education, as well as advancing policy that results ultimately, hopefully, in systemic change. As you might know as well, we were created by the Government of Canada as a Crown corporation in 1996, as part of the Japanese-Canadian Redress Agreement to reaffirm the principles of justice and equality, ultimately for all of Canada. Now, one of the ways that the CRF contributes to this goal towards justice and equality is through NARF, the National Anti-Racism Fund, which really ultimately supports our commitment to build a national framework for the fight against racism in Canadian society through the strengthening of the capacity of both racialized communities and organizations that work with racialized communities, with religious minority groups, and perhaps most importantly, with Indigenous people to carry out their work to combat racism, to create opportunities for meaningful dialogue, and to create opportunities for learning and sharing conversations about race, racism, racialization, etc., with the broader public. Over the past 2 years, the CRF has made a pretty sizable investment of almost $4 million to support the work of organizations like yours. As Mohammed said, more than 200 organizations across Canada And I'm really happy to say that over the next 2 years as well, we will be making additional investments. We're actually going to be investing about $6 million over about the next 18 or so months to support anti-racism events and youth initiatives and projects in Canada. This includes, as you know, the $1 million that we're talking about today through the NARF Events and Youth Initiatives program, but also we'll be announcing, hopefully before the end of November, an additional $2 million in project funding to be allocated before the end of this fiscal year, before March 31st. As I said, I expect that we'll have an announcement about this before the end of November. And the good news is we'll be doing the same thing next year. We'll be committing $1 million for events and youth next year and $2 million for projects next year. And of course, you'll hear about those as announcements come out. So please stay tuned. We hope you'll continue to stay involved with us, and we hope you'll continue to apply for our grant program. Now we'll move on to the next slide, please. And I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the themes and objectives of NARF. And I should say that these are in no particular order, right? We are interested in funding activities in all of these areas. As you complete your application and you consider these key themes and objectives, we require that you at least focus on one. You could focus on more as well. And ultimately, our themes and objectives include what you can see here. So we want to work to address systemic racial barriers, ultimately reducing the barriers that many of us experience in Canadian society through addressing systemic racism in a range of spaces and places, including the education sector, the healthcare sector, the justice system, public services, criminal justice, employment, public life, and beyond. Really, we want to reduce barriers that are systemic, that are institutional, and that are longstanding, as we all know. We also want to invest in research and education, ultimately promoting and increasing the availability and accessibility of data and evidence, and supporting the sharing of community insights on race relations in Canada, making sure that we're telling our stories based on evidence, doing so with the voice of community in mind, and sharing those stories wherever we can. And that leads to our third theme and objective, which is public awareness. We want to ultimately, through NARF, support the informing of public policies through the highlighting of systemic and institutional barriers that racialized communities experience in Canada, that religious minority communities experience in Canada, and others experience in Canada. And finally, we want to support cultural and intercultural community building and creating cross-cultural opportunities through discussion and dialogue on issues of race and racism, racialization, religion, etc., ultimately in the interest of building awareness and supporting communities like yours and organizations like yours to collaborate to have these kinds of conversations in the range of settings that we'll fund. Next slide, please. And finally, and I'll pass it over to Sharon, there are a number of expected results that we're hoping that you will achieve in your applications and in your projects. As with above, these are in no particular order. We're interested in all of these equally. And again, we ask that you address one or more of these in your applications and in your projects. One of the results we're seeking is increased public awareness on policy issues related to some of the stuff we've talked about: race relations, anti-racism, anti-hate, racism, racialization, etc., at a range of levels, whether it's in your backyard, in your local community, whether it's across your province or across your region, or nationally. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We're also interested in increasing public awareness of Canada's cultural diversity, increasing awareness of factors, again, such as race and culture and ethnicity or religion that may be hindering full participation in Canadian life and in our society or economy. And finally, we're interested in increasing knowledge and capacity within our communities, to address racism and discrimination. So with that, I will hand it over to Sharon to review our next slides.
Thank you, Shannon. So moving on, this particular stream is specifically for events and youth initiatives, and the following is how we are defining events and youth initiatives. Also examples of formats that they can be of. So events are community-based, planned public, social, and/or learning occasions and activities related to the themes and objectives, as mentioned in the previous slide, of NARF. and formats can include conferences, summits, workshops, galas, festivals, exhibits, and reconciliation or intercultural activities. And youth initiatives are projects that are youth-led or focused on youth, and youth are defined as persons below the age of 30. Formats can also include the formats mentioned above in the same events definition. And as some specific examples of previously funded events and youth initiatives, we funded, for example, walking tours through Chinatown in BC, and also a project to support students to better understand impacts of environmental racism and solutions to tackle it. So there are multiple formats. They're not limited to the ones on screen. But yes, lots of things that they can be a part of. And next slide, please. Yes. So the next level slides are on the application details. So first off, who is eligible to apply? Canadian Registered Charities is recognized by the CRA and Canadian nonprofit organizations and associations. Also First Nations, Inuit, and Métis organizations, Canadian non-federal public institutions such as municipalities, boards of education, schools, colleges, and universities, as well as grassroots and recognized student groups. And just to pause here for a second, we have had several questions coming regarding grassroots and student organizations specifically. If you are a grassroots or a student organization and you are unincorporated, we ask that you identify a trustee to receive the funds on your behalf. And the trustee will either have to be a registered nonprofit or a charity. And on the funding amounts and conditions, this stream has a total of $1 million available, and the maximum available funding for any event or youth initiative is $10,000. Applicants will only be eligible for funding under the event and youth initiative to a maximum of 2 applications. And there have also been questions if this means 4 applications total for each category, but to clarify again, a total maximum of 2 applications can be submitted per organization. And lastly, there will be a holdback of funds where 80% of funds will be sent after contract signing and the remaining 20% after submission of a final report. And next slide, please. So the following is an overview of eligible and ineligible expenses. Eligible expenses are personnel and staffing costs related directly to programming, program costs such as honoraria, venue expenses, equipment, marketing, communications, and overhead administration costs directly associated with the program. And this can be requested to a maximum of 15% of the total budget. And ineligible expenses include costs related directly to direct financial assistance in form of payments to individuals or families, partisan political activity, ongoing occupancy costs and support of operating deficits, services covered by provincial health authorities, services provided by medical professionals or regulated health professionals other than social workers or social service workers, purchase of investment in real property, cost of alcoholic beverages, and finally, basic shelter beds or transitional housing beds. Slide, please. So this slide has a lot of important information. It's on application deadline, and applicants will have 2 opportunities to submit their event and youth initiative application, and there'll be 2 deadlines. As mentioned before, a total of $1 million will be available, and they'll be split evenly between these 2 opportunities. So $500,000 for the first and $500 for the second opportunity. For the first opportunity, applications seeking funding for events or youth initiatives that will take place between mid-January and March 2024 must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. ET on November 15th, 2023. And decisions for this deadline will be made in early January 2024. So to repeat, we will contact you regarding decisions in early January 2024 if you submit by November 15th, 2023. For the second opportunity, applications seeking funding for events or youth initiatives that will take place between April and July 2024 must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. ET on January 15th, 2024. And decisions for this deadline will be made in early March 2024. So to repeat for this opportunity, we will contact you regarding decisions in early March 2024 if you submit by January 15th, 2024. After decisions are made, we will reach out to successful organizations to confirm funding and also with a grant contract. And funds will typically roll out within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving contract, but this also depends on any negotiations that you may have. Please familiarize yourselves with these timeframes and deadlines, and just when planning or applying for an event to have these dates in mind. And moving on, all events or youth initiatives projects and activities must be completed no later than July 31st, 2024. And the final report must be submitted on the SurveyMonkey Apply platform within 30 days of project completion. Next slide, please. And this slide is on the application process. It is pretty straightforward, and the link to our online portal can be found in our guidelines. We can also post it in the chat. The steps in applying are: number 1, go to the application portal, create or use an existing profile to fill in the online form. 2, attach all the required supporting documents, including budget table and most recent annual financial statements. The budget template can be found in our guidelines on our website as well as an Excel file. There are instructions in the file itself, but to clarify, only the first actual column needs to be filled in during this time. A sponsored package is optional but highly encouraged. And then number 3, lastly, you can press submit and submit your application through our online portal. And also refer back to our decision-making deadlines to see when you will receive news regarding your application. And just to note, our application form is available on our website as a PDF if you'd like to see the questions beforehand. However, this is only for reference and is not to be used as a submission. For recognition requirements, this time around, we will not be asking you to provide a specific plan. Rather, we will be asking organizations to follow the points we have laid out in the guidelines, which are the following. Number 1, follow our branding guide with the following phrase: that the event or initiative was made possible through CRF's financial support. And 2, invite a CRF representative to provide remarks at a public events or youth initiatives, or if more appropriate, deliver an e-message, or video about the CRF and its support. To note for this point, if your event or youth initiative is a private gathering or event, this point can be waived. Next, provide the CRF with a notice of the event at least 4 weeks in advance of the event's date, and if applicable, notify us of the event or youth initiative day or month of observance at least 4 weeks in advance. And the last 2 points are so that on our end, the CRF comms and monitoring team have time to promote and plan attendance if possible. The following criteria will be used to evaluate all eligible applications. So these are alignment with program themes and objectives, achievement of one or more of the expected results. These 2 points were, Shannon went over them earlier. Demonstration of the experience, human and financial resources, governance structure, and capacity to successfully carry out the project based on past experience. Demonstration of need within the local, regional, and/or national context. Proposed budget is detailed, reasonable, balanced, and takes into consideration the efficient and effective use of funds, and must indicate if the project can continue even if we were only to allocate partial funding. And on this last point, there is a question in the application form that will ask if your proposed event or initiative is open to partial funding, so you can indicate this there. And we also want to note here that, still on the previous slide, yes. We also want to note here that we receive way more applications than the funds that we give out. And to illustrate this point, our previous events in Youth Stream maximum available funding was also $1 million, but we received over $17 million in requests. And this is to say that our funding is really competitive, and based on the number of applications we received this round, we may only be able to fund a fraction of them. Slide, please. Now to take some time to introduce the CRF's regional coordinators and program manager on the screen here. And some of them are also in the room with us today. So from left to right, Genevieve is our programs manager based in Quebec. Kevin is our regional coordinator for Atlantic Canada. Rosalind is our regional coordinator for Western Canada. and Zara is our regional coordinator for British Columbia, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. Regional coordinators also share oversight of projects in Ontario, and these wonderful individuals will be in charge of monitoring successful applicants for the region. The following are some support and useful links. For general questions and important links, we have our grants email, linked to our guidelines, as well as our FAQ, which will be updated periodically on a monthly basis. And now we will move on to the Q&A portion of this session. Again, we would like to note that we will prioritize questions regarding the application process, grant criteria, etc. And we may not get to all the questions today in our limited amount of time. If your questions aren't answered in today's session, please feel free to send questions to the grants email inbox. But please note that we do not offer feedback on specific projects and activities. Next slide. And I believe Ariola is going to read our questions out for us. Is there any questions?
Yes. Give me a second. Okay. So first question, somebody asked, as a newly formed organization, we do not have annual financial statements yet. Will this affect our application negatively? And if they seek the help of a trustee, should that organization send their financial statements?
Thank you for your question. This won't affect your application negatively. I believe in this case, we would perhaps categorize you in more of the grassroots as our eligibility states, but we will be looking at your capacity, maybe your reputation in your community. That will all be reviewed during our review process. You could seek the help of a trustee if you are unincorporated. That organization could provide their financial statement, but I don't believe that will be necessary because we will be looking at your newly formed organization.
Okay. And then the next question, it says, if my event is an educational show that is showed 4 times, so in other words, 4 events, can they submit for 2 of them? So can they submit for 2 events out of the 4?
Yes, so you can submit for 2 of them out of the 4. They will be taken as separate events and separate applications, but you can submit both of them.
Okay. The next question, if an organization is acting as a fiscal agent for another organization who is not incorporated, does the fiscal agency apply on behalf of that other entity? And does it count as one of 2 of the maximum applications?
So I think for this question, in other words, the trustee will be applying for, I guess, on your behalf. So if the trustee's name is on that application, then yes, they will only be able to apply twice.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question, would a territorial government-run museum or heritage center qualify for funding? I'm guessing they're asking because they're not sure if they qualify as a not-for-profit or a registered charity. Would a territorial government-run museum / heritage center qualify for funding?
Possibly. I think it depends on the source of funding for that organization. So if it's a federal organization, perhaps not. But if it meets the criteria as we've set out in the guidelines, perhaps you could always follow up with a further question in the grants at CRF inbox to let us know a little bit more about your organization, and we can have a further conversation about eligibility.
And the next question, what does CRF mean by sponsorship package? Does it mean letters of support and reference, or is there more to it?
So when we refer to sponsorship package, we refer to a package that contains main activities, information about your main activities, any sponsors, reach, community targeted, and that kind of thing. So all the information about your event or initiative in that one package. Letters of support or reference could be in that package, but we expect there to be more than that. And there on the website and in the application form, there is a list of what we expect in a sponsorship package as well. So you could take a look there.
Next question. If applying for both deadlines, can an organization apply for $10,000 each time, or would they be limited to $5,000 for each application they're submitting to?
If you apply for both deadlines and you're only applying twice, you can apply for the maximum amount of 10,000
for each.
for each. Yes.
Okay. Another one is, if we're a committee that's part of a larger organization, would you want to see the annual statement for the committee or the whole organization?
We would specifically want to see the committee's financial statement, but you can submit more than one on the portal.
Okay. Okay, another question. What is CRF's perspective on projects that involve many partners and that covers different provinces for a national activity? Is this feasible, or do you recommend that one group applies for one area? So projects that involve many partners and that covers different provinces for a national activity.
Sorry, guys, can I jump in before
course.
the previous questions, before we talked about it? The previous question, I believe there is a committee and an organization. We are assessing organization, so we are not assessing committee. So I believe it will be the organization financials. I just wanted to clarify that. We'll be assessing the organization its whole. So it would be best to submit the organization financial. Was that the answer?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Okay. Back to the project question. Do I read these again?
Sorry, so yes, please.
Okay. What is your perspective on projects that involve many partners that covers different provinces for a national activity? Is this feasible, or do you recommend that one group applies for one area?
I mean, we have had projects in the past that work with many different partners, and I don't think that affects how the project is carried out. In fact, I think that adds to it. So our perspective is that it is legible. If it works better for your organization to work with other organizations, then feel free to do so.
Okay. Another question, next question. If the CRF receives multiple applications from various schools who have sourced a singular educational consultant to deliver the training/workshops, would that be an issue? Multiple applications from various schools who have sourced a singular educational consultant to deliver the training and workshops, would that be an issue?
I feel like I would need a bit more detail. Like, are multiple schools only asking one person to deliver it for everyone? Because specifically for eligibility, we're not funding individuals. So I think there would be an issue if multiple schools are putting all their funding towards one person to carry out their events. But I think we would need a bit more detail.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add to that we want collaboration for sure, but we'll be assessing one application. So in the application questions, you have an opportunity to list all the organization or all the schools that will be contributing to the program and what are their role in there. So, but we'll be funding one organization who'll be accountable to us, who'll be signing the agreement and carry on the projects. So now how you are going to work in that collaboration, that's on you, but there will be one organization. But it will be nice to know who are those partners, what are their involvement in implementing the events or the initiative.
Next question. If an organization based outside of Canada but operating within Canada, is an organization based outside of Canada but operating within Canada eligible for any funding through NARF?
We're only funding national organizations, so organizations based in Canada.
Okay, so it doesn't matter that they're operating in Canada as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd be looking for organizations that are that have either Canadian charitable status, are registered provincially or federally, and that is incorporated or collaborating with as a trustee, an organization that includes either of those. Yeah, I think we'd be pretty hesitant to fund organizations outside of Canada.
Okay, this is gonna so this is a question that's coming up often. I think people must have missed the beginning. So they're asking if they're going to be able to access the recording later.
Yes, so this session is being recorded. It's going to be posted on our YouTube channel, but the link will be on our website for the access.
Can the CRRF fund, can the NARF funds be used for an expanded phase of a project that's already in existence? So they're saying they finished a project last month, but they would love to expand it for next year. Can it be used for a project that's already in existence? Well, this is the information sessions for events. So I'm not sure if you actually mean events or youth initiatives or if they mean projects. But I guess we can still answer the question. So can the CRF fund be used for an expanded phase of a project that is in existence?
So when we're reviewing applications, we take them as separate events, or each application is a separate event or youth initiative. So we will be assessing it as a separate event, not as a continuous event. You could apply for maybe a reiteration of an event that occurs maybe once a year. For example, if you had an Asian Heritage Month event 2023, you want to do the same thing for 2024. But that would be, again, a separate event from the previous event. So we will be assessing separate, not continuous events, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. So someone says our project is carried out in a prison where the age demographic falls mainly within the target group, the target age group, but it also includes folks that surpass it. Would this significantly impact our eligibility?
You could also apply for the events stream, which doesn't have that age limit. So that could be something you look into.
Okay. I'm just going to see the question. Oh, someone is asking. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've got one here about are private convenings eligible, or are they all supposed to be public? Sharon, you touched on that a little bit, but do you want to speak to that again?
Sure, yes. So we do understand that there are private gatherings that some people may want to plan for, maybe for either religious or cultural events, and those are completely fine. They don't have to be public, and we won't be asking to speak at those either. So yes, those are eligible.
I just want you to, so you've answered this question, but I think they must have missed it. So I'm going to read out again, and so that you can answer it again. Would grassroots organizations in Canada be able to apply, or would they need a trustee? And if so, could they still be considered the lead applicants?
Yes, they can apply, but if they are unincorporated, they will need a trustee of either a nonprofit or a charity, and they can apply, but they can just note their trustee in their application when applying.
I'll just add to that, Sharon, if I may, please refer to the FAQ document on our website. This question has come up a fair amount over the past couple of days, so we'll be offering some additional information about what exactly we mean by grassroots, what we mean by student groups, and the requirements around trustees. So please watch for that. That FAQ will be updated in the coming days and weeks. So if you have questions after the sessions, please make sure to refer back to it. Or additionally, you can send us an email at the grants inbox.
There's a question here. Okay, one of the grant's key themes is research and education. Would an event to mobilize knowledge from a study related to racism in healthcare be considered a fundable event?
As long as it aligns with one of the themes or objectives, yes. But again, we can't speak to specific project activities. But yes, as long as it aligns with our themes and objectives, as well as what we're looking for in the eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one question here, Sharon, about one of our project will take place in November. What would be your suggestion if we intended to apply to this initiative? So that's I read that as a project to take place November 2023, not 2024.
Yeah, so unfortunately for these 2 rounds, we won't be assessing events that take place before 2024. But as Shannon mentioned earlier, there will be other opportunities next year for both projects and events. So please look out for that if you require funding next year.
So there's one, go ahead, yeah, Abiola.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm scrolling, trying to see if there's any question.
There's one at the bottom. It looks like maybe the last question. Are we able to get feedback on our application prior to submitting it? And Sharon, you've talked a little bit to this, but do you want to re-articulate this?
Sure. So no, we cannot provide feedback on specific project activities, but we can speak to process, deadlines, and process and deadlines and eligibility, that kind of thing, but not details.
This is the question I think I must have missed. It says if the event or the conference costs more than $10,000, can we indicate that we're looking for other funders for the event? Yeah.
You can indicate that, but again, on one of the eligibility slides, we will be looking at if an organization can operate or hold their events with partial funding or with CRF funding. So if you have not, I guess, received other funding or support before we review your application, then we might assess that a bit differently because we can't fund a project that would not survive with only $10,000.
This question I think might need clarification. So it says if we have a longer term project that has specific activities that occur within the grant timeline, can we apply for those specific activities?
So if it's a project, I'm reading this as it will span like the month.
2 years.
Oh, 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see. Well, for this time around, all of our projects and activities must be completed no later than July 31st, 2024. So perhaps you could apply for another phase of your project or a separate project next round, but we will not be providing funds for a 2-year long project this time.
Oh, I think they're
Can I
trying
add
to
to that,
say,
Sharon? So
yes.
I would add that, you know, if you have funding for a much larger project and you're looking to get funded a component of that project, I think that is totally fine. You know, I think as a funder, we're always interested in opportunities to leverage the funding of others and to complement other funders as well. So if it's a discrete piece of a larger project that, as Sharon says, happen within the time frame that we've published, I think it would indeed be eligible. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this question says, are there special guidelines for using the grant in a public school setting?
There's no special guidelines, just refer to the ones on the website.
Okay. Those are the questions so far.
There's another one there that is, if an organization is successful for November and January rounds, can we not apply again next year?
Oh, you can apply next year.
Yeah, we have no expectation that there would be a stipulation on this. I would, however, say that, you know, we don't have unlimited resources, and to be economical if possible. Also, in the interest of managing your time as organizations, we don't want you to be submitting, you know, many applications just because of the extent of work it takes to do so. But be strategic about the number of applications that you submit to us for sure. But again, there's no limitation on you. You can apply for every round, for every stream, if you like. So there's a question here about CS Mari, and are we able to apply for the promotion of a CS Mari funded project? And as a CS Mari funded project, it's a series of videos. They hope to apply to CRF for funds to share the videos on social media, etc., and host an event. Do you want to speak to that, Sharon?
So one of the questions in our application form, it will be asking you if you're funded by someone else, or whether or not you can also provide details as to if that funding has ended or if it's still ongoing. But I think, as Shannon spoke to this point before, to amplify your project, then yes, we will be assessing this on as a separate kind of project than the one that you're doing. But yeah, I think do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just add that we do coordinate with other funders. So for instance, we coordinate with Heritage Canada, really in the interest of reducing duplication where possible. Of course, we don't want to necessarily be funding the same thing. That doesn't mean, however, that you can't be funded by Heritage or CS Mari and by us. They would just have to be different projects. But certainly, we would see value in there being complementarity between those projects. It would be great if one project builds upon another. As long as the piece that we're funding has a very kind of discrete role, purpose, objectives, etc. Anything else, Abiola?
Okay, yes. So someone says, to clarify, existing projects or events and initiatives can be carried over, but can have a new separate component. And they wanted us to provide more examples, but I think we can just answer the first question, which is that if existing projects can be carried over or can't be carried over, but they can have a new and separate component.
I guess as an example, for example, there have been projects in the past where they hold conferences every year for youth. So they would apply for a conference in 2023, maybe, and then apply for a reiterating conference, but for the same kind of group of people, but for 2024. So they are separate, but they are kind of the same thing with different, but not the same panelists, not the same project activities, but they are the same kind of format. So those are eligible. Okay.
Storm is asking, oh, I must have missed, when will we know if our application has been approved for a grant, and what is the process and timeline?
Okay. So again, all the deadlines and application deadlines and those kind of things are in the slide deck, which we will send over as well, but also on our website in the guidelines. But just to repeat, if you submit by November 15th, 2023, we will contact you regarding decisions in January 2024. And if you submit by January 15th, we'll contact you in early March 2024.
There's a question here in regards to, I think, one of the questions on the application. So the person said, for the below listed question, I'm going to read the question, which says, which communities will your event engage with? That is in design, implementation, and evaluation. So in regards to that question, they're asking, should they check off each box based on their school population, being the people receiving the anti-racist workshop?
Yeah, you could definitely frame it that way. I mean, anyone that is involved, I would just put that in that answer. So maybe students, teachers, maybe even parents, that kind of thing. So anyone that is involved in your project implementation.
And last question, and then maybe we'll wrap up.
Very last one.
Sure. Yeah.
Can one apply for the 2 intakes for the same project? Can one apply for the 2 intakes for the same project?
Oh, as in apply on November 15th and January 15th for the very same
for
project?
The same project.
Sharon, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to speak to that?
Can you speak to this?
Sure, yeah. There is no limitation in this regard about, what you submit to us necessarily. If it's you want to kind of double your chances for funding, we've stated that you can submit 2 applications for funding with no kind of limitation. So I think the answer to that is yes, you could. Clearly, the time frame for delivery would be different. And again, we want to make sure that folks have multiple opportunities to apply for the projects that they've deemed as priorities. So I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for your questions. Again, if we didn't get to your questions today, please feel free to contact us at our grants@crf.ca email inbox. And there's also a French session tomorrow if you'd like to join that one, if you are a Francophone or if you just want more information. That'll be tomorrow at 1 p.m. The registration links can be found on our social media. And again, this session is recorded. It'll be sent out, not sent out, sorry. It will be on our website and on our YouTube. And we will also be sending out the presentation deck afterwards.
Can I maybe just add one thing to that? I think since the question has come up a lot about the video and the resources, I think when we send you the deck, we'll also provide detail about the timing of the posting of the YouTube video and the recording of this session, just so you're clear about when it will be out and when you can access it. And I'd also like to offer my thanks to all of you for attending today and for joining us. We look forward to reviewing your applications in the coming weeks and months, and wishing you all a good day.
Thank you, everyone.